How many do we need for a quorum?
Robert Book is in.
Oh, thanks, Rob. Let's see. For the Land Use Committee, we need 12, and for the EST Committee, we need 8.
Okay. So far, we have so far we have 17. We need 3 more. No, let's see. Let's say 16. We need 4 more.
Good evening, Mr. James.
Good evening, Ms. James.
Good evening, all.
Good evening. Okay, we've shown it. 16.
So today's meeting is a combination of EST and land use?
Yes, joint and simultaneous. So we'll hear the action item and we'll vote on it either way. But if we have a quorum for both committees, it'll count for both committees. If we have a quorum for one committee, we'll just have a vote for that one committee. And the worst is if we don't have a quorum for either committee. So hopefully we'll get there.
Um, 1. So we need 6 more committee members at this time?
Well, we need one more person to have a quorum for EST.
It's the Environmental Sanitation Transportation Committee. Maybe when I'm done with this. You've been on the computer a lot today. Well, I've actually been reading.
Oh, I think we have Ms. Stern, so that gives us, okay, we now have a quorum for EST, Environment, Sanitation, and Transportation. Let's give it a few more minutes, Ms. Tyus, and we'll see if we can get another, I think maybe another 2 bodies for land use.
That's fine with me. Thank you.
Oh, Ms. Wedderburn's joined us. That's 1. think we're good. All right, I will call the roll and just confirm that you are here. I will say thank you if I hear your name. I will say nothing if I don't hear your name. For land use, Albert Appleton. Princess Ben James.
She was just here.
I heard.
Here.
She's here.
Here.
Thank you, Miss Ben James. John
You're welcome.
Buckholz. Robert Callahan. Janet Collins.
Present.
Thank you. Nora Daniel. James Ellis. Ben Farley. Nijani Granville. Kathy Island. Zerzima Jordan.
Here.
Thank you, Mr. Jordan. Peter Crashes.
Here.
Thank you, Mr. Crashes. Sarah Lazar. Sherry Norton. Fiora Ortiz.
Present.
Thank you, Ms. Ortiz Joyner. Robert Puka.
Present.
Thank you, Mr. Puka. Adam Sachs. Ethel Tyus.
Present.
Thank you, Ms. Tyus. Gib Vaconi. Irsa Weatherspoon.
Present.
Thank you, Ms. Weatherspoon. Sharon Wedderburn.
Present.
Thank you, Ms. Wedderburn. Elaine Weinstein.
Here.
Thank you, Ms. Weinstein. And Deborah Young.
Here.
Thank you, Ms. Young. We have,
I didn't hear my name.
who's that?
Regina Kinsey.
Ms. Kinsey, I don't have you on the list for the Land Use Committee.
Isn't this the EST too?
Yes, it's a joint meeting, but I was just calling the Land Use Cluster.
Okay, thank you.
And as a point in fact, I don't have you on the voting membership for the EST committee due to attendance at the moment, but I will mark you as present for the next meeting.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
Mhm.
So that's a quorum for land use by 12 members. Now I'm going to call the Environment, Sanitation, and Transportation roll. I will call some people who have already called since there's duplicate membership. Desmond Atkins. John Buckholz.
Okay.
Janet Collins. I have Ms.
Present.
Collins present. Thank you. Holly Fuchs. Jeannie Harris Blenman.
Present.
Thank you. Ms. Jordan is present already. Francis Langley. Bobby Lapointe. Celeste Stern. Saw Ms. Stern. I've marked her present. Mark Thurton.
Here.
Thank you, Mr. Thurton. Ethel Tyus is present. Irsa Weatherspoon is present. Robert Witherwax is present, and Deborah Young is present. We have a quorum for both committees.
Excuse me, did you say that I was no longer on the EST?
No, you're not a voting member for today because of the way we calculate our attendance for the voting roster. You're still a member of the committee, Ms. Kinsey, but you're not entitled to vote today.
Well, when did all of this take? Please send me some information on that because I didn't know anything about it or a special way to vote because of attendance. And usually when I get on this platform, it doesn't work well, but I didn't know anything about, I couldn't vote. I'm still a member, but couldn't vote. Please,
No problem.
please send that.
I'll send you an
Please
email
send that.
offline. No problem.
Yes, send me the rules on that.
No problem. And don't feel compelled at all to hold back. You're welcome to participate fully. Everyone on this call is welcome to participate fully in the meeting. Speaking of which, I think Amy is here, right, Amy?
Yep, I'm here.
Hi, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Good, thank you. Who has joined you from our presenter tonight?
So it's me. My name is Amy. I'm from the Department of City Planning, and joining me tonight is Moon Sun from the MTA.
Hello.
And Jonah Rogoff, also from DCP.
Great. Thank you. We'll come back to you shortly. Let me do some prefatory introductions. My name is Robert Witherwax. I'm the chair of the Environment, Sanitation, and Transportation Committee of Community Board 8. I'm joined tonight by my co-chair, vice chair, Ms. Yrsa Weatherspoon. Tonight is our usual meeting night, so many of the people on this call are our usual committee members, but tonight we are doing a special joint meeting with the Community Board 8 Land Use Committee, and I'll turn it over to our committee chair and our board chair, Ms. Ethel Tyus, to introduce that.
Thank you very much, Mr. Witherwax. This is a presentation by both the City Planning Commission, Department of City Planning and the Metropolitan Transportation Authority on recommendations to provide more readily accessible entries into subway stations, rapid transit stations, either elevated or underground. And using this approach, the MTA, with the help of DCP, will be able to access buildings that are near elevated train lines and subterranean train lines from private property. It appears to me that we are saying to both agencies, please pursue easements with these private owners to provide for that access. For instance, if a building is near an elevated train line, MTA would work with that owner to build a connection from their abutting building to the elevated train line platform. Ditto for subterranean train line platforms. I don't see where right now we have a lot of those. I'm grateful that we finally got an elevator for the Brooklyn Museum on Eastern Parkway, New Washington Avenue. It only took a few years, but we finally got it. And now we can do this and make it easier for a lot of people who are wheelchair bound or have problems with their mobility. So I would ask the presenters to take it away, share your screen, and show us what you're proposing. Please, go ahead.
Sorry, can everyone see the presentation?
I can see
Okay,
it.
cool. Great. I will let Moonson take it away then.
Oh, okay, great. Well, good evening. My name is Moonsun Park. I'm with the MTA. Thank you so much for your time. I think we could just jump to the next slide. Great. The MTA, the Department of City Planning, and the Mayor's Office for People with Disabilities are proposing a citywide zoning text amendment to provide more opportunities for the MTA to collaborate with developers to get to system-wide accessibility more quickly and efficiently. This proposal comes out of a 2019 City Council report entitled Zoning for Transit Accessibility, which recommended zoning changes to help increase transit accessibility. So our proposal includes two components. The first component is a system-wide transit easement requirement.
I go down and ask June if
The second component is an expansion of the transit improvement bonus to the highest density areas in the city. Our presentation will focus on the first component, the easement requirement, because of its applicability in CD8. Go to the next slide, Amy. So as most of you know, our subway system is very old. It's over 100 years old, with most stations built before 1950, which makes making them accessible very, very challenging. And while the MTA has made progress towards increasing accessibility, including 11 new ADA stations, including Eastern Parkway Station last year, we still have a long way to go. Right now, 136 out of the 493 subway and Staten Island railway stations are accessible, which comes to about 28% of all stations. And 25 out of the 39 commuter rail stations within the city limits are currently accessible. Go to the next slide, please. So what that means is that with less than 1/3 of our subway stations accessible, it makes navigating our subway system extremely difficult for those who need an accessible station. Someone who requires an accessible station will often have to take a circuitous trip, and that adds many more minutes to their ride. With more accessible stations, many more New Yorkers will benefit. That includes people with ambulatory disabilities, seniors, parents and guardians with young children, and people with temporary injuries. Next slide, please. What this slide shows is that over 1/4 of New Yorkers could be impacted by the lack of accessible stations at any time. And this situation is only becoming more pressing as the number of New Yorkers over 65 is growing at a faster rate than the population as a whole. We can go to the next slide. Here's your elevator at Eastern Parkway. The MTA is fully committed to station accessibility. It's demonstrated in our current capital program, which includes more than $5 billion towards making 77 more New York City Transit and commuter rail stations accessible within New York City. So what that means is once they're complete, at the end of our capital program, the current capital program, 43% of our subway stations will be fully accessible, and a subway rider will not be more than 2 stations away from an accessible station in all 5 boroughs. But we need more tools in our toolbox. Okay. We need more tools in our toolbox to help us get to system-wide accessibility, which means making all stations accessible. And zoning for accessibility is such a tool. I do want to emphasize that this initiative will not replace our capital commitments, but only supplement our capital commitments. Go to the next slide, Amy. Thank you. And what this slide speaks to is some of the challenges we face when making our stations accessible and why zoning for accessibility will be so critical to our efforts. Finding space for elevators inside of our stations that are really old and complex is very challenging. We have many stations with narrow platforms, many stations with tight entrances and tight turnstile areas. And so finding a space for an elevator shaft can be difficult. And then outside of our stations, particularly the elevated stations, as you can see in that image to the right, the sidewalks are often narrow, and there's oftentimes very limited space between the buildings and the elevated platforms. Also, when we put elevators in the sidewalks, we often have to relocate underground utilities from water mains to sewer lines to electrical lines, the whole gamut. And that only adds to the cost and timing of installing elevators. So getting an easement within a building for the MTA to install an elevator will help us address those challenges while also alleviating crowded sidewalk conditions. I think at this point, I will hand it off to Amy, and she will explain what zoning for accessibility is all about. Thank you.
Thank you. Today, zoning is in place to help alleviate some of these burdens and support the construction of transit improvements. Specifically, zoning can be used as an effective mechanism for ensuring greater coordination and alignment between new developments and transit station needs. By leveraging station access improvements in places where investment is already occurring, zoning is able to ensure that opportunities for coordinating developments and station improvements are evaluated and realized. As a result, we get a better designed station inside, and we also get better sidewalk environments on the outside because the station entrances have been located off the sidewalk. Currently, transit-related zoning provisions generally consist of transit easement requirements and station improvement bonuses, both of which are pretty limited. Easement provisions address the challenges of locating new station entrances and other transit amenities. An easement, which is a legal right to use another's land for a specific limited purpose, has traditionally been used to provide space for new station entrances, passageways, or ancillary facilities that support subway lines such as emergency egress or ventilation structures. However, in the zoning resolution today, these provisions have very limited coverage and only apply in a few areas in the city, such as Second Avenue for the Second Avenue subway line, and most recently in the Special Inwood District. Also, the zoning resolution doesn't currently provide a citywide consistent approach for facilitating transit easements on development sites around transit stations. And as a result of these limitations, there have been missed opportunities for MTA to locate ADA access at optimal locations on development sites next to stations. Which brings us to zoning for accessibility. So this is a proposal that seeks to create more opportunities for accessibility throughout the transit system through the zoning tools available to us. To support the long-term planning needs of mass transit stations and facilitate transit station upgrades, zoning for accessibility proposes to expand the easement requirements system-wide to most station adjacent sites. To provide zoning flexibility on sites where easements are provided to offset the potential burdens of this requirement. And I grayed out this third point because it doesn't apply to CV8, but I just wanted to include it and show it for completeness. It increases participation in the transit bonus program by increasing its area of applicability to other high density areas in the city.
I'm sorry, why
the first-
isn't, I'm sorry, why isn't CD8 considered a high density area?
Oh, so it only applies to R9 and R10 districts, which is in primary CBDs, and there are just no R9 areas by transit stations in CB8. Okay, so the first component of this proposal is a system-wide easement requirement that would assist MTA and other transit agencies with identifying opportunities for locating future station access points and other station facilities. As part of this requirement, all developments and enlargements on zoning lots within 50 feet of mass transit stations and in applicable zoning districts would need to file an application with the MTA and the chairperson of the City Planning Commission to determine whether an easement on the zoning lot is needed to help facilitate station access improvements in the future. Applicable districts include residential districts that support multifamily apartment buildings, which are generally more compatible with transit station entrances and other transit related uses. These districts include R5 with a commercial overlay, R5D districts, and districts with a higher density than R5. And then this also includes medium and high density commercial and all manufacturing districts. Okay, and then, sorry, while the process of obtaining a certification would be required for most sites within 50 feet of a transit station, it's anticipated that the MTA will only ask for an easement in limited places that are most optimal for future transit access around each station. So here is a map of CD8 and all the stations that are relevant to Community Board 8. We can come back to this if you have additional questions. We also have individual station maps if you'd like to see that after the presentation. All right, so in order to facilitate easement agreements in the future, targeted relief from certain zoning limits would be provided to minimize potential challenges for construction on a site. There are 5 general categories of provisions being provided. So number 1 is floor area and open space provisions, which would ensure that the accommodation of an easement does not reduce development potential and to allow greater flexibility on locating an easement on a development site. Number 2 is height and setback modifications. These would be provided to facilitate the accommodation of all permitted floor area that is given to a site. Number 3 is parking relief, which would address potential limitations created by the easement on providing required parking spaces. Number 4 is use allowance, which would be made available to support compatible uses around station entrances that would enhance the character of the surrounding environment. And number 5 would be streetscape provisions, which would ensure that the developments are appropriately designed around future station entrances in a manner that would minimize conflict between transit users entering and leaving station entrances and vehicular traffic. In a bit more detail.
What?
I'm sorry, did someone say something?
No, what are you saying?
Oh, sorry, I took a drink of water, so I paused.
Okay.
Sorry. So in a bit more detail, where easements are required, the proposed zoning would provide floor area exemptions and lot coverage increases in certain districts. Where easement areas are located outside of buildings, they would be treated as permitted obstructions. The proposed zoning would also allow height increases and additional street wall flexibility and create parking relief in the form of a deduction and parking waivers for small sites. It would allow temporary uses within the easement volume until such space is needed for a new station entrance and allow commercial uses within 50 feet of an easement to promote compatible uses around station entry and exit points. And finally, it would exempt easements from streetscape requirements and ensure that curb cuts are not located within 30 feet of an easement.
This is only for the MTA, correct?
This is for the development.
Oh, there's a lot of development.
Development
So these
near
are the
MTA sites.
So this is all of these zoning relief would apply to the development where the MTA is asking for an easement.
Only
Not
for
all
the
of them
interior.
will
Okay.
apply.
I got it.
So not all of them will apply in every case, but these are available in case there are sort of conflicts that need to be addressed.
Okay, got you.
Okay, so in conclusion, zoning for accessibility proposes a zoning text amendment to establish a framework for coordinating the siting and provision of transit station improvements with new developments on adjacent sites. As part of this framework, a required consultation process would apply to all developments and enlargements on zoning lots within 50 feet of mass transit stations and in applicable zoning districts. Where easements are needed, targeted relief from certain zoning limits would be provided to such developments and enlargements in order to minimize potential challenges for construction on a site subject to the proposed requirement. For sites below 5,000 square feet or where conversions are proposed, the requirement would not apply. The provision of easement is voluntary on such sites and where provided may also receive zoning relief. In addition to the proposed set of relief, further use, bulk parking, loading, and streetscape modifications would be available pursuant to discretionary review and approval. In addition to this new system-wide easement framework, the text amendment would include an expanded transit bonus mechanism that, again, does not apply in CB8.
Just one question.
Captain,
Yes.
hold your questions for another minute. Let Amy finish and then we'll come back.
Okay, all right, go ahead.
You're on the list.
Go ahead. Thank you.
And then for such sites providing transit improvements for the bonus modifications to other zoning provisions would be available pursuant to additional discretionary review and approval. So we are currently here in the process. So ZFA was referred out officially to the community board in ULURP on April, sorry, this is a non-ULURP item, but it was referred out to the community board on April 5th. We are currently in the spring summer phase of our public review and comment period. We have referred this text amendment out to the 59 community boards around the city. The public review includes briefings to all of those community boards, to the 5 borough presidents, to the 5 borough boards, to the CPC, and then eventually to City Council. And we're looking at a potential adoption in the fall of this year. That concludes my presentation, and we are happy to take any questions.
Okay, I only have two questions. One is this not only subway, how about the Long Island Railroad?
I can answer that, Amy.
Sure.
So zoning for accessibility applies to the Long Island Railroad as well, within anything that's within New York City limits.
Okay, hold on. Okay, because there's buildings going up, say, 804 Atlantic Avenue, which Long Island Railroad runs right underneath that system, as well as the one there on near the Barclay. So it's the Long Island Railroad and the subway.
But it's stations, Captain Staten. It's got to be within 50 feet of a station. Is that correct?
Correct.
So Barclays Center Atlantic Terminal, the LARR and the MTA stations there, they do count, but just the mere fact of the existence of the railroad under Atlantic Avenue doesn't count till we get to Nostrand. And I would have loved to have had this when we were doing the Nostrand station.
Oh, wow.
It would have solved a
The elevator is very close to the building, yes.
and I would have loved to have had this when we had development on Franklin Avenue and Eastern Parkway. That would have solved a lot of problems at Franklin Avenue. I would have loved to have had this when we did the building on the development that's now the Chipotle on Park and Flatbush. That would have provided a perfect place for an elevator to the 7th Avenue stations. Can we go back? Is there any?
Do we have to go back and redo this? What?
That's my question. Is this in any way retroactively applicable to existing developments?
No, it's for future.
Okay.
What are you saying? It's for the future? It's not.
It's if somebody wants to build something near a subway or LIRR station, if this passes in the coming future, they get a zoning bonus or some alleviation from some zoning burdens, if you will, if they provide an easement for subway access. My second question then is,
Can I just chime in, Rob? They don't get a zoning bonus. The zoning bonus doesn't apply.
yeah.
They get the offset floor area that's occupied by the easement, and
So can they transfer that or what?
They would
can
be
they
able
transfer
to,
those variants?
the area that's occupied by the easement, the floor area that's above grade street level, they could use that. That wouldn't count towards the developer's floor area, and that they could use that elsewhere in their development.
Can they sell it like an air right?
Can they sell it if they wanted to? It's not very much. I mean, any developer can sell their air rights.
So it's transferable. It's not an easement pertinent to the. No.
That was the question. Is it transferable?
Any so
Are you sure?
So
Please be sure.
any unused floor area on any site can always be transferred over to an adjacent property owner.
Okay, interesting. One more question about the presentation, then I'll certainly open it up, of course, to others. But the determination about whether an easement is needed, right? So if you're a developer and you're proposing to build within 50 feet of a station, you're supposed to go to, I forget the exact list, but the MTA and the CPC and say, do I qualify for an easement? How is the determination, or talk me through that. What's that conversation like in the view of this language?
So, right now, developers who build within 200 feet of any MTA infrastructure or stations, they're actually required to come to the MTA for review of for their project, just so to make sure that there's no impact on our infrastructure. This would essentially be folded into that process. So we have a core committee that reviews right away, initially whether we would need an easement, whether an easement would be useful for us to provide future station access, particularly like to provide for a future elevator to connect into the station. For the most part, I would say that in many cases, we're going to be able to determine right away that that site is just not in the right location. And so the MTA and the CPC chair will send a letter of certification to the developer saying, you're fine, you will send it over to DOB, and then they can go on their merry way. In the event that the MTA determines that an easement would be useful, then we give our general parameters to the developer on what the preferred location, as well as the general easement dimensions that would be useful for us to, for example, put in an elevator in the future. And then the developer, with that guidance, will come back to us because obviously they need to accommodate that within an overall building. So they would come back to us with a site plan with the proposed easement, with the proposed location, and then we would review, and then it becomes a conversation, and until we come to an agreeable site plan with an agreeable easement.
So agreement is a critical factor in that. The MTA
Absolutely.
is not going to be in the position of saying you must do this.
No, the MTA, we would not take an easement that would make the site unusable, the development site unusable.
How about instead of unusable, less desirable to the developer?
The developer needs to, you could demonstrate that to us, and then if it really becomes such a case, such an instance where there is really no other location, then we may, have to come to that point. But I mean,
And is
obviously, we would try to
domain-
find a mutual solution.
Would eminent domain be at the end of the day if a developer is intransigent? Would the MTA just come
No,
on?
this is not about eminent domain. This is really more about making sure that we don't lose any, there are no more missed opportunities for us to locate an easement within a development. Over the last several years, at least since I've, been at the MTA, there've been so many missed opportunities because there's no requirement. And so because of that, we're gonna have to put, elevators in locations that are less than optimal, which will take us, more time to install and also cost us more money. So this is more about just ensuring that we don't miss those opportunities going forward, and not about trying to get easements in every development. It's more about the missed opportunities.
Oh,
As
there's one more
someone-
question I want to ask. Go ahead.
Let me just say thank you. I appreciate that perspective. I started agitating or activating for the Eastern Parkway subway station when my daughter was in a stroller, and I lived on Eastern Parkway. Well, she just had her 18th birthday on Sunday, so I was very happy to see that come along in due course. So hopefully we can get the rest of these in. And CB8, as the subway map shows, I mean, we're peripherally bounded by several, dozen of subway stations, but we
That's
only have
correct.
one
That's correct.
within our actual boundaries. So we'll be talking to you about the Franklin Avenue shuttle soon, I'm sure.
Actually, we have Utica Avenue with an elevator,
Which is
one.
shared with CB9, but yeah.
It's on our
No,
side.
it's on our side of the street as well.
Yeah, and so I think the next one would be Franklin, because of the
Missed
connection.
opportunity with that development on the corner with the Starbucks. We could have had an easement right there.
That was a missed opportunity, like MTA is saying.
Yeah.
We don't
Yeah.
want any more of those. We have to be vigilant, put our heads on swivel, so we look into the future and anticipate this kind of stuff.
Okay, let me just ask this one
Go
question.
ahead.
Is this going everything forward? Let's say they did something, say in Staten Island, and they wanted to build. Would that also apply?
I'm not sure I understand the question regarding Staten Island. Can you
I'm
clarify?
saying, I'm looking at plans now that they might want to run a rail track up on the east side of Staten Island. So would all this apply also?
This zoning for accessibility? What, does it apply in Staten Island?
Yes. Yeah.
Or
It applies.
project.
We're talking about the future now, right?
So, Captain, let me if we build, let's say, more relevant to us, if the Utica Avenue subway does go down Utica Avenue, right? We build an elevated line down Utica to the south. Would this apply to future built stations? I would think the answer is yes.
I
We're
believe the
guessing.
answer.
I hope not. I hope you're saying yes. Now, like, I'm hoping not guessing.
Mr. Staton, give the presenters an opportunity to answer. Thank you for joining us this evening, but we need to give the presenters an opportunity to answer questions, please.
I would say news, all of our stations, such as our newest stations are the Second Avenue stations. They're all required to be accessible, any news station, because of ADA law. But that's an interesting question. I don't know. I don't know if my colleagues at City Planning know whether it would apply to any news stations that are built. But I think that the same parameters apply in terms of within 50 feet and within certain zoning lots that are 5,000 square feet or larger, and within the applicable zoning districts.
That's correct. This is a citywide text amendment. It applies to all subway stations currently existing and future subway stations if they become built. So this would apply in the future. Let's say the subway expands all across Staten Island. This would apply to all of the properties that are within 50 feet and fall within those parameters next to a subway station.
Thank you. Thank you. Other questions?
Yes, I have a question. This is Jeannie Harris.
Hi, go ahead, please.
I wanted to know, will there be an elevator by Eastern Parkway and Nostrand? Would that be considered?
I would ask a MTA or DCP to answer that.
Would zoning for accessibility apply?
Or is it in the current capital plan?
It's not in the current capital plan. But
okay.
Would it apply if there is a change on that corner? Okay, for Community District 8, it's that service serves two community districts, 8 and 9. Okay, eastbound and westbound. So I think the question is, if there is new substantial development at that intersection, what are MTA's choices or requirements under this plan?
If there is a new development that falls within 50 feet, that's 5,000 square feet or larger, and that's within, and I believe it's R5 or higher over there. I'm not sure, but I think it is. And we do have station-specific maps. Then they would be required to come to the MTA to ask us if we need an easement in their development for future station access.
Yeah, the zoning at Nostrand and Eastern Parkway is mostly R6A C24, and so this would apply there.
Thank you. More questions, please, and then we're going to look for a motion.
Ms. Wedderburn's hand is up.
Ms. Wedderburn?
Hold on 1 second, people.
I also see Mr. Thurton's hand up. We'll give Ms. Wedderburn a minute.
Thank you. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm, and this is not a question to our guests, but it's more a reminder for our committee members that when we're looking or we're discussing about accessibility, we have to talk in terms of accessibility of different train lines. So what Ginny said before is, pertinent. Let's not let's not only look at the number 4 train, the Lexington Avenue Express, but the local train specifically, if we have an opportunity at the Nostrand and Eastern Parkway station, that would be something to jump on, because we don't have accessibility. Now traveling with a nonagerian mother, I can totally understand the circuitous routes that we must engage in order to accommodate her ability to walk up and down the stairs. And she still manages to get out. But I just wanted to, just caution to just think about the express train, not to just think about the potential development along Atlantic Avenue or Atlantic Yards. But I'd also like to ask this question, and this is purely hypothetical. Oftentimes we have developers who seek reductions in their parking requirements. So how does this match up with?
Is this the meeting or what? This is Julia Boyd.
Hi, Ms. Boyd. You're in the right place. It's Robert Witherwax.
I've been on this phone for over an hour trying to get this thing. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm sorry.
You're in the right place. But I'm going to hand it back to Ms. Wedderburn to finish her question. Thank you.
Oh, okay.
I think I've almost forgotten my thought, but oftentimes we have developers that come forth that seek a in their parking requirements. And I noticed there was part of the zoning relief would be deductibility of parking spaces. How does that look?
Sharon, I think we lost the actual question there. Say it again.
So one of the things is that frequently we have developers that come before us and say that in their plans, they're seeking to reduce the parking space requirement for the proposed buildings. So if part of the zoning relief is a deductibility of parking spaces, how does that match up between, a developer's request to reduce parking spaces and the further deductibility of parking spaces? Does that mean that we have no place to park cars?
Okay, I can speak to this. I'm going to share my screen again. There's a diagram that I just wanted to show you. So everyone see my diagram? Okay, cool. So we can see here, this is the easement volume that's required for the elevator to go downstairs to get to the subway platform. And so the type of parking reduction that would be allowed under ZFA is to account for this sort of subterranean space that usually would be used for parking, but is now taken up by this easement space. It won't be more than is necessary. Whether they seek a special permit to reduce the amount of parking that they're seeking is separate, I guess. And so that is up to the developer's discretion on whether they want to seek it or not. And because it's a special permit, it also comes to the community board. And so you will be able to get that application and comment on it.
Amy, thank you for that. So I would just say to my fellow committee members to be mindful of this, because we've had more than one recent development which mentioned the deductibility of parking spaces. And while we have transit, not everyone can go from one place to another via public transportation.
Just one more question. Is the Grand Army Plaza within our district?
I believe we have a say in it.
The eastern half.
Yeah.
I want to remind you that they do have a station that is under the library there.
Right.
We just got an elevator a block and a half away.
I know, but I'm saying the D train or the Grand Army Plaza is one. That D train that platform is still there.
Yeah, there was a phantom platform built in the basement of the library for the
That's
line that goes
correct.
to.
Don't forget. I mean, if the developers are coming along and they want to do something, that's within that footprint.
Well, let's hope they don't build in the library.
Not the library. No, I don't mean in the library. I'm talking about the footage there. So that
Oh, sorry.
Grand Maui Plaza is in our community board. Is that correct?
Yes.
The eastern half.
We share it with CB6.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Staten.
Share all of our stations either with 6 or with 9, and then we have an interest in those that are in 3, the AC line that runs along Fulton Street. But we only have the Franklin Avenue shuttle station at Park Place that's entirely and exclusively within CB8. Mr. Thurton, you had a question.
Yes, this is directed only for new construction, that's correct?
Yes, it applies to new construction. Sorry.
Okay, so in reference to new construction, at what time period, once this gets approved, at what stage of their application or their approval can you guys step in? I mean, if it's already been approved, can you guys step in and say, hey, can we renegotiate some easement at that point? Or what is the deadline for their application to that you guys could step in and request for changes?
Well, you're talking about if zoning for accessibility gets passed by the city.
Correct. Mm-hmm.
If they've already been within the DOB system, if they've already, for example, got their permits for their building or for their foundations, then I mean we'd be hard pressed to try to go in there and try to negotiate an easement, get an easement out of that development.
Okay, and how have you guys already did any future views of what stations as possibly that could have new development going on?
Well, the MTA, you know, we don't look, our business is not to look at, you know, what all the soft sites are, but it's certainly with this tool, it will help us examine developments that go next to our stations to see if we can site elevators inside those developments.
So
Or
you don't
easements
have
for
you
future
don't have an
elevators.
aspirational map of every subway station and all the parcels around it that you hope get developed? You don't have that? I'm kind of surprised, actually. Let me ask kind of a variation on Mark's question. What if a developer, it's 50 feet of a station, not a station entrance, right? So what if a developer parcel comes along that is near a closed entrance? An entrance that one time existed but has since been closed, and we've got a couple of those bounding CB8. Is that an opportunity to reopen some of those entrances?
I don't want to speak to that part because that's outside of my purview, and I can get back to you about that, but we would still, it's any development within 50 feet of our station box. So basically the whole station outline, which includes platforms, etc. So we would certainly take that under consideration.
And just to be clear, is this only if the developer is already looking for a variance, or is this even as of right development?
This includes as of right development.
As of right. One question.
Mr. Staten, hold on a second. Mr.
Okay.
Staten, I'm going to hand it to Weinstein for a moment.
Okay.
Elaine, unmute.
Sorry, it took me so long to unmute. It's just a recommendation, but because there have been so many missed opportunities that have been discussed this evening, wouldn't it be smart, prudent, I don't know what words you want to use, for the MTA and the Department of City Planning to put together a map of almost developed land or about to be developed land and match it up to to entrances to subways 50 feet from that proposed development? Otherwise, it seems to me you're going to miss potential opportunities if developers say to themselves, the hell with the easement. I want to push this forward without worrying about the easement. Just a thought. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Staton, back to you.
Oh, okay. You know, there's right there on Eastern Parkway, the developer is tearing down part of the building. The elevator, I mean, the new basement that they're building is right next to the subway. So he gets a automatic easement with that program?
I'm not sure where this is.
It's off on New York and Eastern Parkway. He's building the basement out against the. You remember we talked about that when we were doing the landmarking. Remember that?
Is it a new development and an enlargement?
Does he get the easement automatically?
I'm sorry, Mr. Staton.
Yes.
That building, got the house number, but it's on the north side, the northwest corner of New York Avenue and Eastern Parkway. It's a landmarked building. The owner wanted to expand his basement, cellar, really.
Right.
And hypothetically, I'm not sure about this, but it sounds like it was within the 200 feet that you mentioned earlier. They reached out to MTA, and MTA wrote back and said that it was okay to do the excavation. So,
but does he get an easement?
Now it's on those two owners. If it rains and you get water coming in either side, it's on you guys. So, but we were concerned that the building, being a landmark building, that they were closing off a breezeway that LPC mistakenly ignored the fact that the breezeway ran from Eastern Parkway down to Prospect Place behind all of the houses on the west side of New York Avenue. They missed that one, but that's not the first time LPC has missed stuff in its landmarking decisions. So thank you, Mr. Staton. Mr. Witherwax, do we have other questions?
I see Mr. Thurton raised his hand again.
Yeah, thank you. In reference for your easement review, do you guys have a time span once you start negotiating with the developer to get your survey done? And do you also have a time span to get the elevator completed?
Amy, should I answer that?
Yeah, sure. Go.
Okay. Developers that meet all of the requirements in terms of location and size and zoning district, when they come to us, the MTA and the CPC chair, we have to respond within 60 days to say whether we need an easement or not. If those 60 days pass and we don't say anything, then they're relieved of that requirement. But within those 60 days, first we have to certify whether we need an easement or not. If we determine that we do need an easement, then we go through the steps of providing the parameters of preferred location and size. And then the developer, as I was saying, they would come back and give us the site plan with the proposed easement within that site plan. And then the MTA has 45 days to respond to that site plan. And we most likely will respond even earlier than 45 days. We just there are some certain groups within the MTA that we need to bring into that conversation. It may be a few iterations based on any comments that we have. So it may take a few rounds, but we always have to respond within 45 days. The 45 days is a time limit for us to respond to a site plan, but it's not the overall time limit, only because obviously we can't control how long a developer may take to come to us. So it's a time frame for the MTA and the CPC chair to respond to the developer site plan. And it really might depend from developer to developer. Some may go really, really quickly, and others may have to go through a few iterations to get to an agreed upon site plan and easement.
And then what's the time frame for the actual construction of an elevator? Are there sort of carrots and sticks with that?
Well, certainly, I'm not part of the group at the MTA that determine, that is part of the capital planning process, because many factors go into determining which stations get elevators. But certainly, I think having an easement in the optimal location will, I would say, would certainly be part of that overall calculus.
Thank you. Sharon, Ms. Webburn, did you have another question? I see your hand is raised.
I'm sorry, that's an inadvertent hand raise. I'll lower it.
All right. Any other questions?
Mr. Witherwax, do you want to request a motion?
One more question. I mean, are we going to get the presentation sent to us?
Yeah, Amy Johnson, can you send us this? And what's your ask for us tonight? Do you want us to take a position this evening, if in your ideal outcome? And do you need the full board to speak on it as well?
Since this is a non-ULURP item, none of this is required. But of course, we would love to hear from you, and we would love a recommendation, like your recommendation and your comments. And so I leave it up to you what you want to do. But yes, I can definitely share this deck with you.
Great. Yeah, as somebody reminded me the other day, we're advisory, but that means our job is to advise. So, let's, I would happily, Ms. Tyus, as you said, entertain a motion to dispose of this somehow, jointly or severally.
Before we go any further, can I just interrupt? Anna Collins?
Yes.
I would like to say, I would like to, usually we get presentations ahead of time, if we can study them thoroughly, before we take a vote. So I don't understand why this would be any different.
I thought this was sent out previously.
Not what we saw today. There was something else.
I agree with Ms. Collins on that. I mean, it's something for us to review and be prepared for the presentations. I mean, then we would have better, more, I mean, it'll give us an opportunity to ask more questions when we analyze it more in depth. So, I mean, we always seem to have that problem that the presentations are normally done at our meeting and we don't have any opportunity to review it. But I think we should have an opportunity to review it before all these presentations are done.
Okay, there was an email circulated on March 16th with a link to the proposed, to this planning for accessibility, zoning for accessibility. March 16th, it was sent out.
I see one.
And
the same one that was sent in the last few days, right? Or something different?
I'm looking at it now. I'm bringing it up. They have a summary page and then a detail page, which I'm bringing up now, and an annotated zoning text. So I just need to remind my neighbors that I think everybody's working. This has 32 pages and it looks pretty much the same. It looks almost exactly the same from March 16th email. Okay, so.
Well, then I'd like to say, if that was sent out March 16th, it's now April 27th.
I'm sorry?
It was sent March 16th?
Yes. Okay,
and
so.
It's now April 27th. It seems like maybe a reminder should have been sent out. I don't know. I'm going to look see if I can find it.
I don't want to be inordinately critical. I have a pattern and practice of trying to mark stuff on my own to check it out and review it before our meetings, because this is business. This is business. I don't want to be overly critical for anybody who has been as studious as you are, Ms. Collins, with attending to the details of these meetings, but I do need to ask people to really mark their calendars, put a reminder. Google has all sorts of little tools you can use to remind oneself to look at this stuff.
So, can you give me some more information about that? I don't see it in my, I don't see it.
Yeah, Ms. Tice, it may have only been circulated among the chairs. I'm not sure. I'm not sure the district office sent it out to the full committees.
Okay. So let me.
However, though I will if Mr. Thurton and Ms. Collins are making a motion to table this for further review, we'll entertain that and we'll take a vote on it. However, I feel this is
I can agree with that. I can agree with that.
I also feel that the substance of this is, so cuts in our benefit as a district. And again, we've got missed opportunities that I wish we could have back for something like this. But I can see how this is an unalloyed good for the community as a whole and for the transit riders as a whole. I mean, I don't see how there's any way I would vote against this except for, it doesn't go far enough. And I'm not one who votes against things for that reason. So I would entertain a motion to approve it on the spot.
And each person would look at the presentation in their own way. So some may look at it and see it as positive. Some may look at it and see it as not positive, something they didn't like. And some may look at it and say, well, I'm not quite sure. So I think that everybody should be granted the opportunity to study a little bit further to make an informed decision.
Well, I just circulated the March 16th email to Livable Streets Google group and the Land Use Google group.
Amy, were you going to say something?
Yeah, so I just I think it might be helpful that since this was referred out on April 5th, the community board does have until June 4th, I think, or maybe 5th. It's a 60-day period. And so you do have another month and a bit to review this presentation and the materials in this application. If you want me to come back, if you want the MTA to come back to answer any additional questions you have, we are more than happy to come back. We can give this presentation again if you'd like, but if you have additional questions after reviewing the materials, please send them to us. We would love to get them. I'm sorry.
I think that's a great point, Amy, and I think that gives us enough time to maneuver and satisfy everybody. And it reminds me of something that I usually say at the top, and I forgot to, which is thank you, Amy. Thank you, Munson, for your time this evening. I know it's your job, but it's also, you're up here in the wee small hours of the evening at 7:30 at night doing your job. So thank you for that. Thank you for your time. I'll entertain a motion to table and further separate review by the committees, maybe, if somebody wants to make said motion.
I motion to table. This is Ethel Tias.
Thank you, Ms. Tias. Is there a second?
I'll second.
By Princess. By Princess.
Ms. Collins and Ms. James, Ms. Ben James tabled. Do we want to take a vote on that, or are we happy with a motion to table just being procedural?
A show of virtual hands.
Virtual hand.
It's too far for the technologically inclined of us.
I can't see the virtual hands though.
Well, then there's no harm. We've got a few minutes. Why don't I just call the roll and on the motion to table, and we're good. Princess Ben James, motion to table.
Yes.
Thank you. John Buckholtz, motion to table. Janet Collins.
Yes.
Thank you. Eugenie Harris Blenman.
Yes.
Thank you. Zerzima Jordan.
Yes.
Thank you. Peter Krashus.
Yes.
Thank you. Fior Ortiz.
Yes.
Thank you. Robert Puka.
No.
No. Thank you, Mr. Puka. Celeste Stern. Mark Thurton.
Yes.
Thank you. Ethel Tyus.
Yes.
Thank you. Irsa Weatherspoon.
Yes.
Thank you. Sharon Wedderburn.
Yes.
Thank you. Elaine Weinstein.
Yes.
Thank you. Robert Witherwax, no. Deborah Young.
Yes.
Thank you very much. The motion passes with.
Hey, nobody called my name.
You're not entitled to vote, sir. Not this evening. Come around in another couple of months. The motion passes by both committees by a
By
wide
how,
margin.
by how much? Can you give us the numbers, please?
There were only 2 noes, and one of them was on the EST committee and one of them was on the land use committee, but there were 12 votes in favor. Some of those members are on both committees.
Mr. Whitterwax?
Yes, Mr. Thurman.
I just want to say I apologize to the MTA that you guys did send it out. I do apologize. I thought you didn't send it out, but it just wasn't circulated with our group. So I do apologize to you in reference to that.
Yeah, I didn't see that the presentation was on the link too, so my bad as well. I would have forwarded it if I had noticed it. But thank you. I think that's enough business for EST for tonight. It's our night. Ethel, do you want to dispose of your members or anything, or?
Well,
A question.
Lynn, go ahead, Ms. Young.
Okay. All right. My question is, okay, so now that we've voted to table it, I want to know how we are going to come together to have dialogue, to entertain questions and any clarification. What's the plan? I mean, to table it is one thing, but to table it and do nothing and have them come back without us coming together just seems a waste of time.
Thank you for that question, Ms. Young. We'll have to have another joint meeting, it would seem.
Well, or we heard the joint presentation jointly. We had a nice joint discussion. I think each committee can deliberate separately and vote, but then the full board in June should hear both committees' reports. That would be my suggestion off the cuff.
I'm willing to go with that 100%, whatever reduces our workload at this point.
I'd like to say, provided we receive the presentation.
I sent it around just now to both committees, both Google Groups.
Okay, great, thank you.
To land use and to livable streets. That livable streets is EST, correct?
Correct.
Right, so that's circulating now. Check your email. There are links in there that will take you to the website for the proposal zoning for accessibility. In preparation for the next land use committee meeting on May 6th, Thursday, May 6th, I would ask everyone to look at the proposal for 840 Atlantic Avenue. That will be a ULURP hearing that, excuse me, Mr. Staten, that has been advertised in the city record. It's a formal ULURP hearing, so please read the materials and be prepared for a full presentation from the proponent and a vote. That will be our vote on that ULURP item. They have they are registered and moving through the ULURP process. It would go from land use to the full board and then to the borough president's office. So take a look at that.
And when is that date?
Our regular first Thursday meeting in May 6th.
In May.
Okay. Yes.
Ms. Tyus, may I ask a question?
Yes, please.
I don't know which version of the presentation that was just circulated around, but I do want to emphasize that the presentation that we gave today focused pretty much on the easement component of zoning for accessibility. I'm not sure if the other one circulated around also goes into the zoning bonus component, but just to make clear that we focus on the easement component of zoning for accessibility because that's the one that's applicable to CD8.
I don't see that in this one that was just circulated there. Sorry.
Okay, I
We'll
wasn't
make
sure,
sure-
so.
We'll make sure the correct presentation gets circulated again. Thank you, Ms. Tyus, for sending that one around. But we'll make sure the office circulates the proper
Yeah.
one the next day or two.
I just pasted it into the chat for everyone, and everyone will be able to see that. And possibly Ms. Park can confirm that that is the one.
How do you get it out of the chat into, okay,
Click on it, it'll take
yeah,
you to the
but
web
it says
location.
external site continue. Can you just send it in the email though?
I
She
did.
All right. So EST, we are going to have a May meeting. This means certainly, and that'll be the fourth Tuesday in May, which, if I look at my calendar, bear with me, is May the 25th. So I will see you all then, and we have two items of business. One is to dispose of this matter, one way or another, with a up or down vote. Do we support? Do we not support? Do we support with reservations? The other is to finalize our committee goals for the next board year. We circulated those in the minutes from our last meeting. I had one or two responses. Hopefully we'll get some more, and we will vote on those as well. And we also have a discussion item that was suggested by an erstwhile committee member about open streets and further ways to support some of the open streets that are on the map but not actually happening in our district, specifically Lincoln Place and the streets adjacent to Brower Park that are mapped, and whether we have a role to play as a committee in that. Otherwise, I'll entertain new business for EST.
It's not new business. This one is, I stepped away for a quick second. It's this Eastern Parkway situation that we've been having ongoing for years, and the DOT is looking to delay the program for about another 18 months to 2-year period, and that's a concern for the eastern section of Community Board 8.
Thank you for reminding me. Yes, a letter, I'll confirm with the office that a letter went to not only DOT, but also our elected officials expressing our disappointment in this decision and requesting a reconsideration and a rescheduling of the project. Well, this is, vital to the safety of pedestrians in our district. It's a plan that's been in the works for years. There's no reason we need to wait a minute more. We'll have an update on that for the May meeting.
Mr. Witherwax, can you please forward me a copy of that letter?
I will ask the board office to do so. I think it was last in their hands.
Thank you. Ms. Neal, does that work for you? All right, so the wheel must be
Any
tied
other
to.
old business for EST? I'll entertain a motion to adjourn if there's no other business.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Aye.
I thank our friends from Land Use for joining us. Let's do it again. This is a fun party. And I thank again Amy and Munson from our government officials. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you all. Take care. Good night.
Good evening. Bye.
Bye.
It's Tyus.
They can use this, please.